On the morning of May 23, 1939, the United States Navy submarine Squalus began another test dive off Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It was a new boat, commissioned less than 3 months earlier. 59 people were aboard, 56 Navy crewmen, and 3 civilians. Squalus had already completed 18 test dives. That record mattered, because the next dive was not being treated as a rescue exercise. A sequence that had worked before was repeated, and this time, one part of it did not. As the submarine went under, a main air induction valve did not close as intended. Seawater entered the after part of the boat. The engine rooms, crew quarters, and aft torpedo room flooded. Watertight doors separated that part of Squalus from the compartments forward. 26 people died in the flooded section. 33 were still alive. They were sealed inside the forward half of a submarine resting on the seabed. The water above them was about 240 feet deep. One of the 3 civilians, Portsmouth naval architect Harold Preble, was among the survivors. So were the commanding officer, Lieutenant Oliver Naquin, and 31 other members of the crew. Another submarine, Sculpin, helped locate Squalus after finding its rescue buoy. Brief communication was established. Then the buoy's cable parted. On the surface, ships and specialists began converging on the site. But locating the submarine was only the first problem. The survivors were far below the depth at which an unprotected ascent was possible, and leaving one by one with escape equipment carried serious risks. The position also had to remain usable. A rescue ship would need to stay over a target it could not see, while divers carried lines and worked against the submarine's hull. The recovery would depend on the surface crews maintaining that connection. The answer coming toward them had begun with another submarine disaster, 12 years earlier. In December 1927, USS 4 sank off Massachusetts. Men survived the collision inside the hull, but the Navy had no reliable way to bring them out. Their loss pushed submarine escape and rescue work into a sustained program. Charles Momsen pursued ways for individuals to escape and for rescuers to reach a disabled boat. Alan McCann helped develop the service version of a rescue chamber. Divers trained, equipment was tested, procedures were written and revised. The result was a steel chamber designed to travel between a rescue ship and a submarine on the bottom. It could be lowered along a cable fixed to the submarine. Its lower compartment could be flooded, so the chamber would descend, then emptied so it could seal over an escape hatch. Once the 2 hatches were opened, survivors could climb into the chamber. Ballast and air would then bring it back to the surface. It was not an escape pod carried inside Squalus. It had to arrive from somewhere else. With a ship able to hold position, divers able to work at depth, operators able to control the chamber, and crews above coordinating cables, air, and ballast. A device alone could not perform the rescue. The submarine rescue ship Falcon reached the area carrying the chamber, divers, and supporting equipment. Other vessels helped establish and hold the position over Squalus. Divers went down to the forward escape hatch and connected the line that would guide the chamber. The work joined preparations made in different places and at different times. Submarine design, deep diving practice, ship handling, engineering, communications, and medical support. The operators named in the log changed between trips. Walter Harmon, William Batters, John Michalowski, and James McDonald took turns inside the chamber. Other divers worked outside it. The rescue was a relay, not a single descent by a single crew. At 11:30 on May 24th, the chamber left Falcon's deck for its first descent. The operational log records each step: flooding compartments, controlling pressure, finding the submarine, making the seal, and opening the hatches. 7 survivors entered. The chamber returned to the surface shortly after 1:30 in the afternoon. The first group included Harold Preble, the civilian naval architect. The system had reached the boat and returned with living people. That did not make the next trip automatic. Every descent repeated the same chain of mechanical steps under pressure, with the chamber moving between a ship on the Atlantic and a hatch on the seabed. After that first departure, Doyle later reported that chlorine gas was present when 18 men moved from the control room into the forward torpedo room. His statement does not supply a countdown. It does show why a working route to the surface could not be treated as a demonstration. The second trip brought up 9 people. The third brought 9 more. By early evening, 25 survivors were out. 8 remained aboard Squalus, including McCann and Lieutenant W.T. Doyle. One more successful trip would recover everyone known to be alive in the forward compartments. The fourth descent began at 6:41 that evening. The chamber sealed to Squalus, the hatches opened, and the final 8 survivors climbed inside. But during the ascent, the chamber's motor stalled and its brake failed to work properly. The log records it stopping, descending again, listing, and reaching the submarine once more. Divers went down. A fouled downhaul wire was cut. The chamber started upward, then settled back to the bottom. 10 people were inside now. 8 survivors and the 2 chamber operators, James McDonald and John Michalowski. The delay lasted for hours, but the danger did not need an invented countdown. The machine that had carried 3 groups safely to the surface was still 200 feet below it, and the last known survivors were inside. Just after midnight, the operators blew the chamber's main ballast again. The depth readings in the log began to fall. 228 feet, 200, 180, 110, 80. At 12:23 on the morning of May 25th, the chamber reached the surface. 2 minutes later, its hatch opened. 4 rescue trips had brought up 7 people, then 9, then 9, then 8. 33 in all. The operation had worked not because the sinking became less dangerous, and not because one person improvised a miracle, but because many people had spent years building and practicing a way to respond before they knew which submarine would need it. The following day, the chamber made another descent to the aft part of Squalus. It confirmed what the flooding had already made likely. There were no more survivors to bring up. The 26 people who died remained part of the same story as the 33 who came back. The Navy later raised Squalus and returned it to Portsmouth with flags at half-mast. The submarine was repaired, renamed Sailfish, and put back into service. But the later life of the boat does not reverse what happened inside it on May 23rd. The rescue had a narrower meaning. Preparation could not keep Squalus from sinking. It could not reach the flooded compartments, and it did not save everyone aboard. What it did was change the ending for the people who were still alive forward. 59 went down. 26 died. 33 came back.